Hi, welcome Nurse Rosa and welcome Dr. Crystal Lawson. And we are in the Healthcare Rule Breakers studio. So I'm just going to give give our listeners a little info about our purpose. So the Healthcare Rule Breakers podcast is existing to highlight bold leaders who defy conventional norms, push boundaries, and transform healthcare. And our mission is really to inspire change by showcasing innovators who are redefining leadership, patient care, and the industry's future. And today we have Nurse Rosa Hart with us. So Rosa Hart is a stroke nurse navigator. She's from Norton Healthcare in Louisville, Kentucky, which Kentucky is my home state as well.
Hi, neighbor.
She created and hosts an international award-winning podcast, Stronger After Stroke, for the Norton Healthcare Neuroscience Institute, which is being used as a resource for stroke survivors and their loved ones around the world to have their best quality of life after stroke, which is actually the key reason that we thought she was a healthcare rule breaker. She's on the National Advisory Council for the American Nurses Association Next Gen Nursing Project to consider how the ANA can best incorporate the next generation of nurses. She is the advisory board chair for Power Up Nursing, a company that's dedicated to advancing the science and spirit of nursing, and will be representing the startup at Health in Vegas, where it is for a digital health award. She is the elected chair of the Ethics and Human Rights Committee for the Kentucky Nurses Association. She also hosts Nurse Rosa's Insights on the Health Podcast Network, and she interviews stakeholders on their ideas to transform healthcare. So welcome to the Healthcare Rule Breaker Studio, Rosa, and I'm excited to jump into this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Alyssa and Crystal. So nice to meet you.
I am thrilled to meet you. And as Alyssa opened up with, we just really want to inspire people to make change. And I would love to hear the story about how the podcast came to be, because I've really been on this mission about the voice of nursing and the power that we have. And you're doing it. And we want to highlight this. So we're highlighting a lot of things out there in the media, but it's people like you we need to know about.
Oh, thank you so much. It is an honor, really. And while you have the title Healthcare Rule Breakers, I've always really identified as a rule follower. So that's really surprising to me, honestly. That's why I'm on the ethics committee. But yeah, I'd love to share the story of how it all came to be, because it's really been an adventure, and it's probably come from just saying yes to a lot of opportunities when I wasn't familiar, or probably had some imposter syndrome of why should I be the one to do this. My nursing background, I'll start with, I've worked with stroke patients in the ICU starting in 2013, first as a nurse's aide, and then once I became an RN, stayed on that unit. And so that's my exposure, was to stroke patients. And so I got to see the transformation when they would get TPA, alteplase, or have a mechanical thrombectomy. And they would come in with half their body not working. And then after that treatment, it was like a light switch was flipped and their body came back online. It was incredible. And so I wanted to see that for more people, but I also, working in the ICU, those patients got to leave pretty quick. And so a lot of my time was spent with people having the worst outcomes and walking with them and their families through their last moments and the hardest days of their lives. And that was really hard. And I got burnout before COVID, just from that heaviness, and transitioned to being the stroke nurse navigator for our system, where I get to call the patients who got to leave and go home and talk to them about how to prevent having a new stroke. So that's my clinical stroke experience. I got the stroke certification through the AANN, which was really helpful for me in building confidence that I know what I'm talking about as far as stroke care. So I highly recommend certifications for that. And but at that time, I didn't know what a podcast was.
So why did you choose podcast?
It was my friend's idea. So during COVID, everything shut down. I was working from home, and when I was working my way through nursing school, I was in class 4 days a week and then working 3 nights a week at the hospital. And then once I was at bedside as a nurse, I picked up a lot of extra shifts, and any extra money I had did not get spent locally. Like, I just stayed at home a whole lot resting. That shift work can be really draining. But once things started to open up again after the initial shutdown, my friend wanted to start a podcast supporting local businesses. And I was like, what even is a podcast and how are we supposed to do that? I don't want to buy a whole bunch of fancy equipment. And he was like, we could just do it with our phones. And I was like, what? And so he showed me how to do it. And so we just started going around visiting different restaurants, and I would talk about their safety precautions and try to help people feel comfortable going out to eat and supporting local businesses at that point. And then because that podcast grew and I grew a kind of a social media influencer reputation locally through interviewing business owners and creating content for promoting their businesses, the Norton Neuroscience Institute invited me to create a podcast for my stroke patients. And since I'm the one who would talk to them, they're like, what needs do they have? And you can kind of create the content because you're the expert in the content. And then we would love to have a podcast for them. And so they were like, take some time, come up with some ideas. And 2 hours later, I came back with 2 pages of topics and who I would interview, because we have like 120 neuro experts at the Norton Neuroscience Institute. Okay. Like, it is a wealth of knowledge. And so to be able to present that level of expertise and answer these frequently asked questions I could see that was going to be a huge gift to our patient population. For example, let me tell you, we have one of the leading experts in migraine, Dr. Brian Plato, at our headache clinic. And he took time after seeing patients all day to sit down and talk about migraine versus stroke and how to know when you should go to the ER, because sometimes migraine can mimic stroke, and people who go to the ER a lot for that, they don't need one more ER visit, but there's a 9-month waiting list to get in to see them, or there was at the time. Hopefully it's better now. But so to be able to offer that, like, I just offered it to a patient I was on the phone with yesterday. She was really stressing out, and she had seen a neurologist, but it wasn't a headache specialist, and she didn't get all her questions answered. I was like, well, how about this? You start with this episode, listen to what he has to say, and we'll see if we can get you in. But in the meantime, we can get some of those answers that you're looking for that not every neurologist knows. And she was so relieved. She started crying just to have access to that information, to provide her some relief for that. I'm going to cry just thinking about it. But it's such a great resource. And so I'm glad other people can use it too.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, really, you're filling a gap that, most of us sit at home, and regardless of what we're doing, right? It may be, we're entrepreneurs and we're trying to figure out how to market. It's easy to look up a podcast, figure out what's out there. It's not easy to find things to help you navigate healthcare. And if you can, most of the time, it's way above what does that even mean? Even as a nurse, navigating the system is so complex. So it's just a beautiful thing to watch what nurses actually do. The community doesn't truly understand it. And I think this is just one great way to highlight this is who we are and what we do. So just thank you for being that resource.
Oh,
yeah. I was going to say, I was totally inspired when I started just watching what you had posted on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so, I would have loved to have this for my patients. Just being a nurse practitioner, you're always looking for other resources that you can provide people outside of a piece of paper, or, trying to make sure that your rounds meet their needs and you keep circling back or trying to find the time, because that's what we're all fighting for, right? We're all fighting for a little bit of time. And so it would have just been, awesome in clinical practice to be able to draw from that. So I was blown away and it was so excited. I was like, when I was telling Crystal about your story, I was like, Crystal, We got to talk to her.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was the catalyst, but then she's like, and let's start a podcast.
Yes.
Awesome.
Just like you said, somebody said, this was my friend's idea. I'm like, this was her idea.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I have a follow-up question. So you've had a lot of success with the podcast with Norton's, and then now you've kind of taken that success and you've transitioned into like learning about becoming an entrepreneur, and what does it look like for Nurse Rosa Hart Media? What is that journey like for you? What are you doing? What are you doing with that now that you've found this love and this passion that we can obviously see when you talk about what you're doing with the patient facing podcast? Kind of tell us a little bit about that, and maybe share about your recent, first adventure.
Sure. And I don't even know, like, yes, it's a transition, but I haven't left Norton. I haven't left being the stroke navigator. I still call patients, and I still make that stroke podcast, and I still do the Lou Review podcast for Louisville, Kentucky, because that's where I live, and that's how I connect with my neighbors, essentially. And we have an amazing food scene. If you think Chicago's food scene is good, you need to come to Louisville, Kentucky, because we're coming up there. Okay.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
we might fight over that one. But come into Louisville, and I'll test your theory.
Yeah, bring it. Bring it.
Yeah, I've been to try the bourbon. Any
for sure.
Any distillery there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So
it's 2 against 1 right now.
don't get me started, because, like, honestly, I've been making that podcast for 4 years. I've been to 400 restaurants here in the last 4 years.
Okay,
and they are
all the knowledge.
Top tier, awesome bourbon bars. So I can tell you where to get the best bourbon combined with like flavor pairings with the food. Okay. It's amazing. Anyway, healthcare podcasting. So in the course of the stroke podcast, because it did get such great reception worldwide from all these people in healthcare, they start reaching out to me on LinkedIn or email or Facebook randomly. And they're like, I'd love to be on your podcast and talk to you about AI and how do we transform healthcare for nursing and all this. And I'm just like, that would be great. I would love to have that conversation with you. But that has nothing to do with stroke. So it can't be on the stroke podcast. So basically, I felt like I needed to create a whole new podcast just to host those conversations. And so that had led to the creation of the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast, which is on the Health Podcast Network. But also, I've been creating content for these local businesses and kind of started off entrepreneurial in a way, because looking at it from that lens. So then when I learned these doctors feel comfortable talking to me about, the clinical side of things, and I can ask them questions that get them to answer in a way that patients can understand and kind of facilitate that translation of their clinical expertise into common speak, for lack of a better term. I was hired by the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine to come do that there. So stay tuned, because I don't think we're announcing the title of that podcast yet, but it should be releasing this fall. And I'm really excited for that opportunity, because I got to fly out to Miami to help create this educational content to improve community awareness for brain health.
Did you ever dream it was going to get this big? Or I think my brain is just thinking forward. There's so many patients that could be impacted by that. Like,
right?
How do you scale it? And just my wheels are turning about the possibilities here.
Literally no. I grew up thinking I needed to have a 5-year plan and all that. Well, this could not have fit in that. I had no idea. 5 years ago, I didn't know what a podcast was. So I watched Z-Dog MD on YouTube, and I didn't even think I was listening to a podcast.
Right.
But yeah, the stroke podcast has currently been heard in 63 countries. There are doctors all over the world prescribing it to their patients. Okay. And it's just incredible. So no, could not have planned it. And if I'd said no, because I thought I wasn't qualified, then they wouldn't have it. So there's kind of that element of who's going to do it if I don't do it? There might be 10 other people. There might be a Dr. Crystal Lawson or an Alyssa Adams who knows a whole lot more about something than I do. But if they don't do it because for whatever reason, it won't get done, right? So it's that whole, if it's to be, it's up to me mentality.
Okay, well, you gave me chills for the morning, so job well done.
Yes.
Well, I'm really excited that you're starting this podcast because, I'm obviously not trying to say people need to break rules or anything, but we can,
but we can learn from each other.
We can learn from each other. We can blaze new trails. There's no rules for it because nobody thought of doing it this way before.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And so just speaking of that and blazing new trails, that's really what I think of when we talk about like, oh, you're doing a listening option for patients, like that you can share. You can say, hey, listen to this episode. It specifically talks about some concerns that you have and may answer some questions while you're waiting for care, right? And so I think it's really just the opportunity to expand. Like, yes, we have paperwork, we have things that you can Google, but really, we have an opportunity where you can listen to a nurse and a physician have a conversation about a problem that you're having and hopefully give you more insight and a plan and answer some questions and a place to start and some of those things that otherwise you don't have access to. You don't get to listen or even maybe, know additional questions that you might want to ask when you talk to your provider or, you're in the hospital and that type of thing. So I think for me, just hearing the whole story and how it's, how it's had impact for you and the impact that you're seeing there with the patients is just incredible.
You know what? I left out something really important that I need to put out there is that we have survivor interview episodes as well. And each of those is selected strategically to highlight aspects of recovery that are relatable, especially the episode where I got to interview Flannery O'Neill. She had a stroke in her 30s and she had aphasia to the point where she couldn't say her name when she first had her stroke. Like, I don't know if it was like weeks or months. She had to go through so much, still goes through some speech therapy, I think, but you can't tell. At this point, of several years later, you would not have a conversation with her and even think she had a stroke. But she was able to verbalize how she felt laying in that bed, how she felt in the weeks and months afterwards when it didn't look like there was anything wrong with her, but she couldn't express what she was thinking. She couldn't express how she was feeling then, and she can now. And there's so many people that I have met over the years who have that aphasia, and to be able to let them hear that it is possible to recover, that they're not the only ones going through this, that just because they can't speak doesn't mean that they can't feel and think and process, and to just let them know they're not alone and that there's hope. And also she points out like what free available online resources there are that people can tap into from wherever they are in the world that they have the internet. Like that level of hope that people are able to get from that episode, for example, and the other episodes where the survivors talk about their struggles and just kind of put words to the experience that you're not going to get from a journal article, because this is coming from lived experience. That's a really important aspect that I want to make sure people know is part of the Stronger After Stroke podcast.
All I have is just gratitude that you are willing to say yes, because people just want to feel seen and heard. Mm-hmm. And like you said, that element of hope. And sure, they have access to record a TikTok or put it on Instagram, but they're not doing it. You're facilitating that and making such an impact. So I'm just so grateful. And my wheels are going to turn all day at all the different people that this could help in various ways. And people already know you in 62 countries as the person who does this. 63 countries. Next week it'll be different. It'll be 65.
Yeah, probably.
So I'm inspired And I know you don't call yourself a rule breaker, but I think you belong in the club.
I
Okay.
agree.
You can be an
Okay.
ethical rule breaker.
Yeah. You can toe the line.
Okay. I like that. I like that. As long as it's ethical. And if I get to be in your club, then I get to hang out with you. So that's where I
Yes.
want to be.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so we've established that Rosa has joined us on the rule breaker side. Well, now we need to know, if you could break any rule in healthcare, what would the rule be?
I was supposed to be prepared for this question, wasn't I? I don't know. Any rule? These are the sound effects of me thinking. Oh, that you have to have a referral to see people. Some offices, some specialty offices, they won't see a patient without a referral. But I mean, there's reasons for that, because insurance may not cover it. But then it's like those people can't get seen otherwise. And what if they don't have insurance? And what if they don't have a primary care provider? That's my favorite, is when I get to talk to these stroke patients and they need all these referrals to places and they don't even have a primary care provider. Maybe they even have insurance, but they don't. And so, like, a big part of my job is connecting people to primary care that never had it before because they didn't think they needed it before they had a stroke. And now, in order to get any follow-up care and refill medications and everything, they need that. And so a lot of my day is taken up with referrals. And so I just wish it was a lot more accessible to people and that there weren't these barriers to needing a referral from primary care in order to get a lot of these other things, which is really fundamental. And I don't know that that's a good answer at all, but
I love it. I would have never thought of it.
There's a wrong answer. Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think there's a wrong answer. So, Crystal, any final thoughts?
I'm just inspired. That I have to stick with that gratitude and inspiration, because I can see all the possibilities, and I think you're just getting started on the impact that you can make. So, and I'm honored to meet you, and I'm taking you up on the offer about the Louisville food tour.
100%. You get over here. We're going on a food tour.
It'll be sooner than you think.
I have a guest room. Just saying. It may have a wardrobe that goes to Narnia.
I'm in.
Not bluffing.
Rosa, I want to say thank you for joining us on the Healthcare Rule Breakers podcast and sharing your bold and innovative idea and how it's had such an impact on patient care and really the healthcare system. And I do hope that we can continue to follow your journey and just see all the transformation that is to come. And I'm excited to see future interviews that you're going to have and continue to follow and stay connected. I do want to publicly thank you for being my podcast coach. And
you're doing so well.
Make the podcast pie even bigger, as another fellow podcaster that I follow always says. She's like, there's room, make a bigger pie, just make a bigger pie. So I do want to say thank you for that as well, and being such an inspiration in this space as we are navigating our healthcare rule breaker journey. So thank you for joining us today. Future listeners, if you're listening and you would like to find out where to connect with us, you can contact us at info@healthcarerulebreakers.com, and or you can catch Crystal and myself on LinkedIn. And Rosa, do you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yeah. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, that's great. But you can also follow me on social media at at NurseRosaSpeaks on all social media platforms. And if you want the food side of things and the travel side of things, you can follow me at Rosa Raves, Raves.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.